Welcome everybody to the second installment of Tuesday Tech Talk, or as we affectionately refer to it, T Cubed, here at CaterLinked. My name is Christina. Today I will be your host, and we're going to be talking about successfully adding new technology to your tech stack. It can be a daunting process, but let's break it down and make it easier. As I mentioned, my name is Christina. I am a CaterLinked coach, a coach here at CaterLinked, and I'm also the CEO of Make Good Lemonade. Make Good Lemonade is a company that is a restaurant consulting company that specializes in off-premise verticals as well as technical onboardings. So this is sort of the space that I work in. When I was on the brand side, I worked on the brand side for a little over 6 years, and we grew a brand from one restaurant company to 12 brick and mortar and virtuals. So I've been through these projects multiple times on the brand side. So I saw it from your perspective as a restaurateur. What I've included on the screen are a lot of the softwares that I've worked with or the integrations that I've done. This is sort of meant for you. If you see anything on here that sort of catches your fancy or that you'd like to talk more about, please feel free to reach out. I'm in CaterLinked almost every day, and I would love to have a conversation and nerd out about one of these with you. Awesome. So let's get started. Adding new technology. Today we're going to talk about what to expect and how to succeed. It can be a really complex and daunting process, but we can break it down into steps to make it more approachable. The first thing that we're going to talk about is vocabulary. At CaterLinked, we believe that terminology and vocabulary shouldn't hinder somebody's ability to understand what we're talking about. There are a lot of terms that are used. Some people use some terms, some people use others. So what I'm going to do is go through the terms that I'll be using during this presentation so that you have an understanding of what I'm talking about, or a little more of an understanding. At CaterLinked, we want to bring everybody along for the ride. We're more concerned with people being able to understand these concepts than we are using correct verbiage for things. So we'll go through this real quick because there's 2 pages of vocab. And this deck will be available afterwards. So if you want to refer back to this, you'll absolutely be able to do that. So let's start with APIs. APIs are basically a piece of software that allow 2 programs to communicate. It's a two-way communication, two-way interaction. APIs, when some people talk about it, they think about it pulling data, one program pulling data from another. Demo or demos, it's a demonstration. It's a meeting where a technology company shows you all the cool stuff that their software can do. Discovery is a process. When you decide that you want to onboard a new technology, they'll go through a process called discovery. They'll dig into what you have for technology to understand the whole scope of the project so that they don't meet any surprises, that they can kind of discover things that might be a little complex before they actually start the project. We'll go into it in more detail later. Integration. In this particular circumstance, we're talking about a technical process that makes sure that a new technology is going to work with everything that you already have. Middleware is a software that helps one program work with another. It's like it's an interpreter or an adapter. A middleware that's used a lot in restaurant technology is called Omnivore. It's a company that Olo owns that works as a middleware. Onboarding. Onboarding is a process that happens at the same time as a technical integration. It's the less technical side of that process. So it's setting an organization to work with new technology. It's making sure that they get email addresses. Everybody that needs access has access. It may be providing data if historical data will have to appear in the software. And it generally includes some sort of training on this new technology. And roadmap. Roadmap is a term that a lot of technical companies use to understand where they're going. Things that are on the roadmap are pieces that they're working on, but they're not ready to be presented to the market. They're not a fully fleshed out plan. They're still sort of working through it. So those are on the roadmap. And the second set of vocab, an RFP or an RFI. These are requests for proposal or information that a restaurant will make to a technology company. And it's going to provide really specific information about a restaurant's particular situation. So what spec they have, project overview, budget, timing, that kind of thing. SaaS, software as a service. It's often actually pronounced SaaS, like sassy. This is a blanket term that refers to any software that you're using via subscription that you usually access by logging into like a web portal or a URL on the internet. A sandbox is a test environment. It's a place where your IT and your new software company's IT or dev group can test the software integration without interfering with regular operations of your company. It's a safe space that they can break things, and they do. Shadow IT. Shadow IT is software that people within an organization use that isn't officially sanctioned by IT. So let's say you're a Microsoft company and you hate Teams, which a lot of people do, and your team downloads Slack. If your IT team hasn't vetted Slack for your organization, that can be considered shadow IT. Spec or specs doesn't refer to glasses, refers to specifications, technical requirements necessary to integrate new technology. A new technology may only work with certain operating systems or points of sale. So it's making sure that the technology that you have is compatible with the technology that you're trying to integrate. And webhooks. Webhooks are similar to APIs, but they're only one-way communication, not two-way communication. So it usually sends data or a request to trigger something in another piece of software. This is also considered pushing data. Webhooks push data, APIs pull data. That's generally how they think about it, even though APIs technically can go both ways. Anywho, so that's vocabulary. All right, let's get into the meat of what we're talking about today without going through slides. Okay, so you went to FS Tech or NRA and you saw some awesome software, or more likely, your boss saw some really cool software and we want to get it. We need it. We have to have this new tech. The first question that you need to ask yourself is, do we need this new technology? What is our return on investment? How is this going to save time or make more sales? Make sure that it's worth the effort because it costs thousands of dollars, hundreds of man hours, and a lot of stress on your people and systems to integrate new technology. So just make sure that you can answer in a meaningful way what this new technology will help your company accomplish. So the next question that you need to ask when you're like, yes, we absolutely need this. It's going to make millions of dollars. So the next step to ask yourself is, can any of your current technology partners manage this for you? Is this something that's on their roadmap? So reach out to any adjacent technologies that you may already use and ask them, hey, do you guys have this? Is this something that's on your roadmap? If you can go through a current company to get this new technology, it's going to save you a lot of time. It's probably going to save you a lot of money because you already have an integration. You already have a relationship with them. You're already onboarded. It's going to require probably more integration. But in the long run, it's probably going to save you a lot of money, time, and headache to go with a current technology. So just make sure that you're asking those two questions first, because I know you saw a super cool company at FS Tech because that's what you do at FS Tech. But I can almost assure you that there are 5 or 6 other companies that are doing something similar. So do your research. So you've decided you must have this new technology. Make sure you're doing your due diligence. Just an aside, new technology, when you onboard a new technology, it can make or break your business. And I don't mean to seem melodramatic, but if you onboard the wrong technology, it can interfere with operations. It can cost a lot of money, and it can be really, really expensive to offboard this technology for something else. So just be very cautious about onboarding new technology because it's really hard to get rid of once you've got it. PSA. So what I've put on this particular tile is just sort of illustrates the process to get from point A to point B, you know, wanting a new technology to having new technology. Again, you guys can refer to this, but this is sort of like a project outline, the steps that you'll go through. And this is what we'll spend the rest of our time talking about. So buying new technology is like buying a house. Nothing is going to be perfect. You're going to have a lot of wants. You're going to have a lot of needs. I need a backyard because I have a dog. I really want a fireplace because I want to put stockings up during Christmas, but I don't need a fireplace. So that kind of thing. So think about people having wants and people having needs. What you want to do to ensure that you get all of that information is meet with every single department in your company. And I know that that seems kind of ridiculous, but there are hidden interconnectivities in your company that you may not realize. So make sure you check with all departments. The worst thing you can hear is somebody say, yeah, you know what? Like, this doesn't affect us at all. But hearing that instead of you're halfway through the project and somebody goes, what are you doing? Like, we absolutely require what we're using today is integral to how we do our jobs. So make sure you do your due diligence on the front end. So meet with all the departments, define their wants, define their needs. Meet with your IT department, get your technical requirements. We want to onboard new catering software. What are our technical requirements for that? You know, what are our specifications? What point of sale are we using? What's our back of house operating system? All that kind of jazz. Also, understand your budget. If you have a blank checkbook, that's amazing. Chances are you don't. With these projects, you're going to have an upfront cost to integrate, and you'll probably have monthly cost for users. So make sure you understand that upfront so that your accounting department doesn't actually harm you in the process. So after you have gathered your requirements from all other departments, investigate software companies. As I said, there are other people doing this, not just the cool company you saw at FS Tech. And maybe you'll end up with them, and that's great. But it's really important to get to that point through logic rather than, oh, shiny pretty. So first, you want to identify companies that are solving your problem. There's a couple of different ways to do that. You can simply Google the tech that you're looking for, and those companies all have websites, right? They want to sell you their product. So Google the tech you're looking for. You can find some companies that way. Ask ChatGPT who's solving your problem in restaurants. Make sure that you enable internet search when you ask that question so you're getting the most up-to-date information. Lastly, talk to your current technology companies. Technology companies that you know are probably going to end up integrating with this technology. Ask them who they integrate with, who they recommend. Chances are they have a list of companies that they work with that can help steer you in the right way. So check the websites out of these companies. They usually have a small summary or data, or not data, like a demo, a video of what they do on their website. So check that out. Make sure that at a cursory glance, it solves your problem. It checks some of those boxes. And then request a demo or a demonstration from their sales team. It's usually very easy to find an email address or a form to fill out on their website because they want you to buy their product. So get ready, identify those companies, send them a request for demonstration to have those calls. Now, let's say that you guys don't have any time for this. You can hire someone to find software companies for you. A lot of your technical support companies or a lot of contractors or consultants can actually run through an RFP for you on your behalf. And if you have any questions on that, let us know at CaterLinked. And then, so let's say that you're able to do this on your own. You're able to conduct demo calls. What you want to do is identify the members of your team who have a vested interest in this technology, the teams that are going to be most affected. Make sure that you have somebody from each one of those teams on these calls. Limit your vendor calls to like 4 or 5. Don't overwhelm yourself or your team. If you see too many of these calls at one given time, Nobody's going to remember what anybody said. It's going to be really confusing. And when you're on those calls, have your list of requirements from the different departments, their needs and wants, and also your technical requirements available so you can ask pointed questions. And in some of those questions, the person may not be able to answer. They may have to get back to you with that information, and that's fine, but just make sure that you're asking that and following up to get that information. Record the call or have them record the call so you can refer back to it when you have to make a decision, or if anybody had to miss the call, because finding a way to schedule a call or 4 or 5 calls with 5 people in separate companies at your company plus a demo company may be unrealistic. It's at least going to be really complex. So make sure you have that information for everybody to refer back to. Also ask the vendors to send you their decks. They're usually pretty happy to do that. So again, you can refer back to it in your decision phase. So you have the demo calls, and then you sit down as a team and you sort of talk through the pros and cons of each one of those different software. They're all going to be very similar, but make sure that, that you're looking at those requirements, the technical requirements. You're looking at, the needs and wants of other departments. And just as a team, sort of talk through it and see what couple of companies you may want more information from that check the most boxes, right? So PSA, on behalf of everybody that works in restaurant technology software, please only send a request for proposal or request for information from a company that you're absolutely sure that you want to move forward with. If you're meh, or you're like, well, let's just send one out, please think hard about doing that. These requests for proposal and information are very time consuming for somebody to pull together for you. It's not just something that they, have all the information down. They're customizing this specifically for you. So please just limit it to the people that you are pretty sure that you want to do business with. If you change your mind, feel free to send that to them a little bit in the future, but please don't make people go through unnecessary work if you're not planning on working with them. But at any rate, those 2 or 3 companies that you're pretty sure you'd like to move forward with, send them a request for information or proposal. Include your technical requirements when you send that to the salespeople. Also, if there are any questions that you guys need some clarification on, they're usually going to be a little more technical. Make sure that you send that to them as well. And then, so you get your RFPs back as a team, again, with all those shareholders and the people that have a need for this software to be usable for their department. Make sure all those people are in the meeting to go through the RFPs. So have everybody in the meeting, fully review all of the RFPs, and pick the option that meets most of your needs, is within your budget, and is compatible with your technology. Those are the 3 main things. Now, if it doesn't meet all of your needs, it may be wise to have a parallel project to figure out how you can satisfy those needs that won't be met on day 1 or won't be met with this product, so that you don't have one team that's sort of out in the wind because you guys decided to change software. So definitely make sure that you address those as well. So you've picked a company, and what they're going to do is conduct discovery. Now, what discovery does is as I mentioned earlier, it's the process where that software company is going to take a deep dive in where you're at technologically right now to sort of understand the scope of the project that they'll be going through. So they may be looking at some of your database information, POS configurations, your hardware in the store, sort of depending on what it is. But once you understand what they're going to do for for discovery, make sure you ask a lot of questions so you can understand what members of your team you'll need to include in discovery. Discovery should only take a few weeks, but you'll probably need somebody dedicated to do it. The quicker that your team moves on discovery, the quicker the whole project can start. The more thorough that your team can be, the easier the actual process will be. Make sure that you're identifying those people, that their workloads are adjusted so that this is something that they can manage. Work with the software company, find out how often, how much time they're going to need into doing some of this stuff so that you can inform the people that will be involved in discovery. So it's going to be maybe somebody needs remote access to your point of sale, or they may need a download of some data. So definitely they'll give you that information, and it'll be a couple of weeks. There was a project that I worked on that I came in the middle of a project after discovery was done, and the discovery wasn't done quite thorough enough, and a 12-month project actually turned into an 18-month project. It added a cost of about $300 per location because we had to add an external card reader. And if we would have done more thorough discovery on the front end, we probably could have mitigated that. So be thorough on discovery, include the correct people. So once discovery is done, you'll start the onboarding process. This is the process that gets your team integrated with this software company. So this is a lot of information that you'll need to provide on the front end that they'll process. They may have questions that they'll ask as they go through, but you'll be asked to provide a lot of information. So it's going to be probably addresses of your restaurants, email addresses, depending on what kind of system it is, bank accounts or mid-merchant ID information, historic data. It could be a whole slew of information, again, depending on what you're doing. And you'll probably need this information for corporate and franchise locations. Make sure that you're notifying franchisees early when they will need to provide this sort of information. Onboarding will generally also include training, either for your whole team or in a train-the-trainer situation. Find out from your software company how they're trying to accomplish that so you can make sure that the correct people are included, if it's your whole team or if it's just your training department that will have to disseminate this to the rest of the team. So that's onboarding, which is like the non-technical part of the process of getting new software. The technical part of that project is going to be integration. And this happens concurrently to onboarding. Sometimes integrating starts a little later because there's a lot of setup, like setting up sandboxes, that kind of thing. Expect that onboarding and integration is going to be a long-term project. And they lay that out in the RFP information usually, but expect this is going to take several months. Expect that you're going to have frequent meetings with the vendor to make sure everybody's on task and that the project is going as expected. They'll usually address any issues they're having with the integration on these calls. Identify the people who need to work on this project. So make sure that their supervisor knows, make sure that their workload is mitigated so they can handle this project. And it's usually, in my experience, been piecemeal. You'll need somebody really intensely for a couple of days, and then you won't need them for a couple of days. So just make sure that you're setting an expectation with that person and their supervisor so they don't get overwhelmed with this in addition to their regular work. Make sure that the people who you've identified need to be part of the project are invited to all of the meetings that you're having externally, and that they're included on any email chains that are specific to what they're working on. And again, make sure that they have the bandwidth, talk to their supervisor. Also, you can allow them to skip internal meetings if they're not actively needed, or if you can provide the updates yourself. So there are some departments that may not be needed through the entirety of the integration. Your accounting team might just be needed at the end. So you may say, you're part of this project, but we probably won't need you for a couple of weeks. Make sure they're invited to the meetings so they can sort of understand what's going on, so they're not coming into this blind. But don't make it mandatory for them if they're not needed quite yet, or if they've already done their part. So one way that I've found teams can be very successful when they're working on an onboarding or integration of new technology is that as a restaurant team, they have internal meetings. It can be pretty awkward if you're leading this project, you jump on the call with the external team and somebody's forgotten their deliverable, but you never followed up with them outside of the meeting. It can be a little awkward to address that in a meeting with a vendor. So the most successful teams that I've seen have internal meetings in addition to these external meetings. So the external meetings, are to work through any unexpected issues with the integration and talk about next steps. Hey guys, just so you know, we're going to need this information for this by this date, kind of thing. And, you know, so-and-so's in charge of it, and this is how they can do it. It's not meant to answer questions about deliverables that people may have. And just deliverables in a project are just things that you owe them. So you may owe them a Excel spreadsheet of email addresses of people that'll have access, or a deliverable may be historic gift card transactions from this date to this date. So those are deliverables. It's just a fancy thing for like documentation or data that you need to provide. So you'll have a bunch of deliverables. A lot of people in your company will have deliverables. So work through those deliverables in an internal meeting rather than this external meeting. Just make sure that people are on task with it. If they have any questions, follow up, basically following up offline from those vendor calls. And they don't have to be, these meetings don't have to be specifically about this project. If you guys meet about something else, feel free to tack it onto something. Or if it's moving pretty slowly, not slowly, smoothly, if your project is moving very smoothly, make it an email. Don't belabor the issue if everybody's sort of on task and on time. Also, if you have franchisees, make sure that you're updating the progress of getting their deliverables in an internal meeting. Your software company sort of treats your franchisees the same as they do any corporate location. It's your responsibility generally, unless you're paying them extra to manage your franchisees. So, but make sure you're communicating with your franchisees, bring them along for the project. All right, so part of integration is testing. Once we have the integration right, we start doing testing. There's going to be several versions of testing. It's mostly going to be in a test environment or a sandbox environment. If anybody that's going to be testing this integration, make sure that they have training right before they start doing this testing, so that their testing is germane, that they're not testing something you're like, oh, that's the expected result. So make sure they're trained on how to do it so that this testing will be on point. Also include people, if your restaurant is going to have this, include people from the restaurant to do the testing, because there are things they'll see that people that work in corporate are not going to see. And you may get a testing script from the software company, which is just a list of steps on how to test the integration. You may want to add your own steps on there. So if it's integrated with something else, once you guys go live, you may want to test that as well. Awesome. And some tips and tricks from doing technical project management, some things that I think might be a good idea for you to know, or just some things to have on hand. Your project manager from the software company is going to ask for information more than once. Make sure you have a file with that. There are some people who've done projects I know that'll just print it off and have it right there so they can refer to it during each of those meetings. If you need new merchant IDs, which is with your credit cards, contact your credit card company early. You may have to contact Amex separately. It can take well over a month to get new merchant IDs. So make sure that you do that early if it's something that's needed. You can have them early. They're just going to sit there. Make sure your franchisees get their mids early too. Sometimes your point of sale requires that you have a license to use certain software in addition. Online ordering, very frequently you need to have a special license. It can cost a couple of $1,000s. So make sure you know if you have to have the software. Make sure you know if you have the software. If you don't have the software, get it. Not software, license. If you don't have the license, get the license. And if you have franchisees, communicate early and often. Make sure that you're contacting the correct person at the franchisee. There are a lot of franchisees that vacation a lot, so they may have a business manager. Make sure that you're contacting the correct person and not the owner if they'll be out of pocket often. Also, a lot of notes about franchisees, huh? If your franchisees need to do anything at all with their firewall, make sure you let them know right away. Fun fact, you could have 4 to 5 firewalls. A franchise could have 4 or 5 firewalls, and each of those firewalls would be with a different company. It may take them a while to unwind that. That is a breakage point on a lot of projects, and it has been for me anyway. Freeze. If you've never heard of freeze before, it's something that a lot of software companies do in the last quarter of the year. Freeze means that no changes can be made to their software. So your project literally goes on hold from like November 1st to January 1st. So you can't do anything. Your manager, your project manager on the software side will usually let you know. But if your project goes over and you weren't expected to go into freeze, this could be an issue. So just be mindful of it. And lastly, if you need to do live testing at a restaurant, make sure that you are testing outside of the live time of the restaurant. So if your restaurant opens at 11, start doing testing at 9. Take in-store managers, ask them for volunteers. People who are willing to volunteer with stuff are more generally going to give you the better feedback because they're really excited about this integration. Okay, and it's time to launch. So exciting. We've gone through this project for months. We've become really good friends with the people at the software company, but all good projects need to come to an end. So when it's time to launch, make sure you're communicating with your team. Make sure at the very, very, very least that you're sending out an email the day before, letting everybody know what to expect, who to contact if they have issues, common things that they may need to know, a login to the URL for that particular software, all of those things. And the night before the launch, there may be something called a cutover or a migration that happens after hours. Make sure that people that are supposed to do that know that. Make sure that their hours are sort of changed that day before and day of. Make sure that the people that are working on the cutover are not people that you need right away at 8 o'clock in the morning, because chances are if something went wrong or good, they may not be in a good mental state to help until afternoon, if at all. When you're managing these projects, the day that they go live, something will go wrong. It's okay. Expect that something's going to go wrong. Something always goes wrong, and that's okay. Make sure you have all of your information, all of your contacts handy. The people at the software company are going to be available to jump in if you have any problems that day. So you will be supported. Make sure that you are in constant communication with those people. And as emails start to come in from your stores, look for trends. See if people are having the same question over and over again. If they are, and it's like a training thing, just send them something out. We had something with credit card readers where there were 2 Ethernet ports on the back of the thing for some weird reason. So I literally sent a picture of myself pointing at which port they were supposed to use because I was getting a lot of emails about it. So try and mitigate that stuff ahead of time, handle it proactively. And after launch, so address anything that you marked for follow-up. So there are things that are going to happen that day. Something is spelled wrong. Something's wrong color. I don't know. But you mark that to follow up. Make sure that you follow up with that. Check in with your team a few times after launch just to check and see how things are going. Address any pain points they might have or issues. Then schedule a monthly or quarterly catch-up meeting with your software company to make sure everything's going okay, but also to stay in the loop about anything new that might be on the horizon. And again, these are big projects. They take several months. If your team doesn't have the time, doesn't have the bandwidth, you can hire a company not only to do the RFP for you, but to be a project manager on your behalf to these software companies. They can handle it. They just tell you what they need. And if you need that, obviously feel free to reach out to us at Caterlink and we can help you find somebody. And that's it. Good luck with your projects. What kind of questions do you guys have? Ooh, okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Okay, what are the common issues you have seen when helping restaurant operators select new technology? One common one is that if the people that you're talking to are not the people that are affected by the software, so let's say the C-suite is handling the project, they can get very caught by shiny things. They are wined and dined by the salespeople. They spend less time concerned about the features and benefits and more about the relationship that they're building with somebody. And to be perfectly fair, it's often the job of people in the C-suite to build those relationships. So that's sort of what they're looking at. But people get caught up by very shiny things rather than the actual project themselves. What else you got? How can your company help with the implementation of new systems? How can my company help? My company does handles RFPs, so I can interview people in your company to find out what their needs and wants are for new technology, and do the demonstrations on your behalf or with you on technology companies that we've identified might solve your problems, all the way through handling the project for you on your behalf, doing customer side technical project management. So I can just explain to your team what the software company needs and what the timing is for what the software company needs. So I can explain a lot of those technical requirements in a way that makes it easier for you to understand exactly what it is that they're looking for and how to get that. Oh, I used an acronym. Sorry. PSA. PSA is actually not a restaurant acronym, but PSA stands for Public Service Announcement. So just like the more you know, I'm dating myself, but that used to happen on network television. It's just a kind note to help you understand a situation better, if that makes sense. What should the timeline look like for each tech adoption process? That's a great question. So it sort of depends on, it actually almost all depends on the restaurant. Tech companies sometimes get a little concerned about timelines, but the timelines are almost always dependent on you as a restaurant getting people the access they need, the documentation that they need, getting testing done on time. But usually gathering requirements and doing demonstrations, or the demos, don't have to be very long, right? Like you can knock out the question, like the needs and benefits, or the needs and wants, in maybe a week. You can do demos in probably 2 weeks. The RFPs are usually going to take a while to get back because they take a very long time. But, depending on how soon you can schedule your team for a meeting and how aligned your team is on what their needs are for this particular project, you can move very quickly through the decision process. Discovery usually takes, in my experience, 2 to 3 weeks, again, depending on how soon you can get access to people, access to the support company. The onboarding and integration has lasted anywhere from, we did a virtual restaurant in 3 weeks, but we did a gift card migration in 18 months. So that's the step that really varies depending on how complex the project is and how fast you can move. But then going live is usually, 2 or 3 days. That's probably a pretty long answer, but it sort of varies depending on the software. How do we balance wants versus needs when gathering requirements for departments? Ooh, that's a good question. So the way that we usually look at wants versus needs is with a term called showstopper. That's the way that we sort of always looked at whether it was a want or a need. Is this going to bring your department to a screeching halt if you don't have it? Or is it going to, so when you're looking at new software, right, it should be not making a department's job any worse. So if not having it decreases the quality of work that a department is has, or if it's taking away the department's ability to work at all, those are absolutely needs. Nice to haves would be, it would save us time if we did this over what we have today, or it would save us money. Either save us money, save us time, or make us money are probably 3 wants, unless they're really, really compelling. This is going to increase our ability to make money by, by 10 if we have this particular product. That's super compelling, and you should look at that. But generally, if it's not a showstopper and doesn't make somebody's job worse, it's a want instead of a need, unless, of course, that's the purpose of the software, is for that particular department to make money, or save time. That was a great question. How do we ensure tech companies understand our unique operational challenges? That's a great question. I think communication. If you can show those companies what you're talking about, or a real world example. So if you say, it takes our payroll company, or not our payroll company, our payroll department 60 hours to do payroll, and we only have, one person, and we've only got that person part-time, say something like that. And we need payroll to take a lot less time because of ABC. We have to use this particular system for payroll because it's what our franchisees are using, and we have a contract that's still X amount. So be really upfront with those challenges, because if you don't tell them, they can't speak to it. So make sure that you're providing this is our pain point and this is why it's our pain point, so they can understand how to speak to you about it. That's a good question. What are the cost implications of choosing the wrong technology initially? So the cost implication would be, even just at first blush, let's say that you picked the wrong technology. Now that whole implementation process that you just went through, you have to go through again with a different company. And maybe you picked this company because it was cheap. So it might actually cost you more money to get off of that particular technology. And let's say that technology didn't save any time, but it's created more burden on your team. So until you get that new software implemented, you're going to be paying for maybe overtime for the people in your restaurants because it's taking longer to do things that shouldn't take so long, or people at the corporate office. There's additional costs too, right? Like if it's taking them longer to do things, then there are other tasks or other projects that have to go by the wayside until you get this fixed. God forbid that this is something with your like inventory management or supply chain. Those could cost you additional money because maybe you have to manually order food rather than, your inventory system just taking care of it. So that's more time, more money on food. Like the more departments that it touches, the more that this cost sort of explodes until you get it taken care of. And by that point, if it's affected enough of your departments, you may not have the money to get off of the technology. It could end your entire company, which is scary. So choosing the right technology is super important. How can we ensure our staff is adequately trained on new software? That's a great question. I think hopefully you have a training team. So if your staff goes through the initial training, it's, I think for me, it's just them being able to use it. So if there's on your point of sale, going into training mode and allowing people to see it and touch it and play with it, or if it's, something that they'll be using on tablets, having a tablet on hand, something that they can touch. So it's providing those tools where they can actually go in with their hands and touch it and play with it. But also make sure that you at your corporate office are prioritizing them getting training. So working with your in-restaurant teams to say, hey, this is a priority. We're willing to pay the overtime to have people come in a half an hour early to, play with the software in front of their shift so that they are getting used to it, or having them stay a half hour late to get used to the software. So it's making it a priority, making sure that your restaurants can make it a priority, giving them that extra time, asking people to do it in their shifts. You know, if somebody's working a busy Saturday and they've got a bunch of other things that they have to take care of, they're not going to look at this. So make sure that you're specifically having them set time aside for it, you know, and making it a priority. You make it a priority and everybody else makes it a priority, hopefully. What strategies do you recommend for managing franchise involvement in tech changes? That's a great question. Franchise relationships are really complicated, but I think firstly, treat your franchisees with respect. They're really important to the growth of your brand, right? And if you have a franchise advisory board, talk to them about these changes that are going to need to be made, because the people on the franchise advisory board are the people that the rest of your franchisees trust. So talk to them, find any pain points they may have. You know, you could run them through the needs and wants. You could have them as part of the decision-making team with this project. I personally, when I was on the brand side, I had monthly meetings with all of our area directors and the area directors that handled the franchisees too. So they knew what we were working on and they were able to ask questions and make sure that they knew. And I was communicating with them what the due dates were, you know, deadlines that we had on certain things, why we were changing technology, what we were hoping to accomplish, and then send out, you know, I'd send out communications to the franchisees as well. We had, you know, a regular newsletter for franchisees, so we always made sure that our stuff made it in that. But communicate with them, treat them with respect, include the FAB, the Franchise Advisory Board, or you know, ask franchisees questions, build really good relationships with your franchisees. They want to succeed. You want them to succeed. So build really good relationships with them. They're usually pretty cool people. That would be my best advice. What team members should be involved in the onboarding process? Does everybody need to be involved? Do some people need to learn / be in charge of different parts of the tech? That's a good question. So generally, so there's two parts of the project, right? There's the implementation piece, and then there's the onboarding piece. The onboarding piece is generally going to be people that are in charge of data. So like if you have DBAs or you have people that are in charge of like your data lake, any of that information, they would need to be involved in onboarding. Probably if you have an area director in charge of like franchisees or franchise relations, you'd want to have them involved in onboarding so that they can make sure that the franchisees are getting their information in. And if you have a project manager like within your company, then you would want them to be involved as well. And not everybody needs to be involved. It's usually just like one person per department, or two people. Like if, you know, they can work in tandem to get stuff done. On the implementation side, though, it's going to be the majority of it's going to be your IT team, and probably if your franchisees are in different systems, you may need to include a liaison that can communicate that out to the franchisees. But not everybody needs to be involved. Just the departments that can provide the data or the access to the technology. I think it's best if they're sort of your subject matter experts on the technology rather than with your current technology, rather than having somebody learn. I think testing should be more inclusive depending on who's affected. So if accounting is affected, then accounting should be in training, as you know, as well as the in-store team. You may want to get like the field leadership or operations leadership involved in training as well. But yeah, it's mostly going to be on the integration side, your tech team, usually the people already know. And then on the onboarding team, it's people that are in charge of data, if that makes sense. What are the critical points for testing new technology in a live restaurant environment? So make sure, and that's a super good question. To me, if it affects your restaurant, it is vital that that you test and test and test. You have your demo vendors usually, or like your test locations, but your live restaurant is going to be hooked up to so many other things. It could be hooked up to menu boards, kiosks, ticket printers, or KDS, which are the kitchen displays. So the reason why you want to make sure that you're testing in a live environment is because there's so much more going on than there is just in like a demo that you have, on a computer in a dusty back, dimly lit room in your office. So it depends on what kind of technology that you're testing, but make sure that you're not testing when the restaurant is open. Make sure that people in the restaurant know that you're testing so they don't freak out. There was a story by a company I won't name, but they were testing an online ordering integration with a pizza place. They put an order in for like 10,000 pizzas to try and break the system, and it didn't break the system. The manager who was on duty didn't know they were testing and called the manager to say, we need all hands on deck because somebody just ordered 10,000 pizzas. So make sure the store knows that you're testing. Make sure that you're not testing when they're actually taking orders, and try and break it. So try and order 1,000 of something. But, again, when they're not open, make sure that things are pushing to the correct other sort of peripheral devices like KDS or ticket printers. If it somehow affects your menu boards or your drive-through screens, make sure that you're checking those as well as you're testing. So if those need to be manually turned on remotely, make sure that somebody has those on. But anything that could be affected, if gift cards are affected, make sure you do a gift card test. But testing before they open, test all peripheral equipment, and try and break it. I mean, unfortunately, it sounds scary, but how should you know if it's time to change tech solutions? What benchmarks should we be looking at? That's a great question. It depends. So in my experience, we knew we needed to change points of sale when there were things that the IT team just couldn't, or like the POS team couldn't make work in the point of sale. When you only have, gosh, I forgot what they're called, but when you can only choose 5 different ways that you can get orders. So, if you can't include, if you're running into limitations of the system that are making it hard for reporting or making it hard for you guys to differentiate where sales came from. So if you can only put third party instead of Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, Skip the Dishes, whoever, when you run into those kinds of problems where like your accounting and finance, probably finance more than accounting team, can't break down sales in a better way, and people just start guessing rather than being able to do things, that's a really good indication. If your point of sale reaches end of life, for catering specifically, it would probably be if there's a more eloquent solution available, something that actually has production sheets, or is able to address some pain points that you're having. When you have a lot of frustrated operators, it's always a good idea to find another solution. Or if your solutions are more expensive. So let's say you have 3 different vendors that are sort of working together on one solution. You may be able to find one company that does all 3 of those solutions together, so you can, downsize the number of vendors that you're dealing with. I think benchmarks are if people are coming up with a lot of roundabout ways to do their job, or finding solutions that make people work more. Before we could take price on DSPs or on third-party delivery, we since we couldn't do that in our point of sale, we couldn't do it on our online ordering. We made a button on the computer that basically was an open dollar amount, so that they could increase the total in the point of sale to match the inflation that we had on third-party delivery. And it was painful making the stores go through that. It was the only thing that we could do to satisfy the needs of the C-suite. So things like that, sort of when you have to go really roundabout ways to accomplish things, consider getting new tech. What else have you got? What's the best approach you have seen or used for tracking a tech implementation with a vendor? Something that would keep both the vendor and the internal stakeholders on track. Project management software is probably the easiest way to do it. And there are a lot of different options. You can do an RFP to find the right one for you. There's Microsoft Project, which is a bit dense, but using things like Asana, or Monday, is it Monday? Yeah, Monday, to keep track, making sure that it's a software that you can assign external and internal people, and then you can assign those tasks out to everybody. It's really transparent. And to be fair, a lot of software companies have project management software that they will assign tasks to the restaurant team to keep them up to date. But I think just project management software, when you set it up correctly, it keeps everybody on task. But that would be my best recommendation. What else? Well, that's it. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time today. I hope you learned something. I hope we've made onboarding new technology a little less scary, a little more approachable. And I hope that you have a fabulous Tuesday Tech Day. Bye, everybody.